I've had to put off my exhibition video in light to these recent events. I've just gotten so tired of people whining and complaining. So to address this, I made a video myself whining and complaining. So in case you haven't known, the SHSAT is a test that 8th graders in my city, NYC, New York City, can choose to take for admission into one of New York City's 8 specialized high schools. So the test is designed to see whether students are eligible to be elected, but it's not that good at it. Many students, notoriously Asians and whites, spend money to prepare for this test. I mean, that's so unfair, right? So, in response to this, Bill de Blasio chose to make the right move and to try to diversify the specialized high schools. He created a program which required a minimum amount of Black and Latino kids to be admitted into it, and a minimum amount of students in that program must be accepted into specialized high schools. So how well did that work out? It failed. The basis of Bill de Blasio's plan was that there were those who could not afford to pay for private preparation and were at an extreme disadvantage. So by setting a minimum amount of students from each race to be in a program, this obviously diversified the schools, right? So how come it didn't work? The problem is not that some students can afford private prep and others can't. So, checking the demographics of New York City, Hispanics account for 28% of those living in poverty, and also account for around 28% of those living in New York City total. So it matches. Asians, who are better off, account for 12% of New York City. They account for 9.5% of those living in poverty. So normally, if we have 12% Asians, then there should be 12% of Asians that are living in poverty. Since Asians only have 9.5% of them living in poverty, they are better off. Now, blacks account for 25% of New York City and 19.7% of those living in poverty. If we do some quick maths, we find that the number of black people living in poverty is 78% of what it should be projected to be, while the number of Asians living in poverty is 80% of what it should be. So, more black people are living better than Asians. What gives? If the black people are living better than Asians, shouldn't they have more money to spend on prep? And in turn, shouldn't they do better on the test? So then why the dismal amount of blacks admitted into STI? So going back to the beginning, why did I say that this test fails at distinguishing students? The reason? It's easy. I've never taken a prep course in my life. I've never done an SHSAT practice exam. I've never had any external tutoring outside of school. And yet, at a free test given out by my school, I scored around 89% out of 100%. This will be more than enough to get into STI, as the cutoff is around 80%, and most students in STI would fall in the range of 87 to 100% on the SHSAT. The test is easier than most normal tests I take at school. Okay, so here's the fun part. Reading statements made by ignorant people who pretend to know what they're talking about. So here's one by Jackson Heights, a school in Queens. So here's some obvious things we already know. The SHSAT, used as the sole admission criterion at 8 specialized high schools in NYC, has created schools that don't reflect our city and are not available to many of our brightest students. How? The test is free! And if I can get to STI without any prep, I'm pretty sure you can too. I'm just an idiot who makes videos and attack people on the internet. Okay, so good thing this petition only has 95 supporters. Now, this one is written by Isaiah Keynes, a kid. Hi Isaiah, I'm sorry if I have to roast you. Okay, I'm currently an 8th grade student, and though I did not take the SHSAT... What? No. Okay. Many of my friends who are black were not given offers to a specialized high school. And your point is? I don't get it. Are you saying that your friends should have been admitted because they're smart or because they are black? Which means nothing. Hey, I believe that my friends should have gotten into a specialized high school. Granted, I didn't take the test, so I don't know if my friends were smart enough to get a high enough score on it. But still, just because they're my friends, they deserve to get in too. The purpose of my petition is to increase the percentage of black and Hispanic student offers to specialized high schools by getting rid of the SHSAT. Okay, continue. Some advantages include more diversity in high schools, and it is a unfair and biased way to select students. What? Okay, first of all, your advantage that you stated is questionable, which I will get into later. And second, how's the SHSAT in any way unfair and biased? You didn't put a single reason to support that, and on top of all that, you didn't bother to put correct grammar in your sentence. In this sentence, you literally said accepting students based on their GPA is less biased and fair, and with this, we will definitely increase the percentage of black and Hispanic students offers to specialized high schools. No. Accepting students based on their GPA is perhaps less fair than the SHSAT. So different schools have different teachers, and different teachers have different tests. So think, if the tests are different, they'll be harder or easier based on school to school. So the only truly fair way to administer the acceptance of students without the SHSAT is by the NYC state test, and many parents refuse for their child to take the test. And what's more, it will stress the student for a course of 5 years instead of one test. And not only that, prep for state tests also exist as well, so you're going to have to crack down on those too. Okay, kids go to harder middle schools, so they will have a challenge, so they can actually learn things. Basing things on your system would mean that kids can go to an easier school just to boost their GPA. At my school, no one has ever gotten 100 GPA before. Well, at another school, my friend consistently gets 102 GPA. Oh, but no, the kids in your school are stupid. Oh, damn, you've got me there. But still, you're right. Come to think of it, accepting students on GPA will probably be the most biased way to screen students. Think, is New York going to allow schools to write their own state tests? If this petition fails to achieve this goal, this percentage will start to decrease over the years and there will be less diversity in specialized high schools. Well, that's not inherently true, since this petition has absolutely no correlation to what blacks and Latinos will score on the test. And even if it is removed, I doubt it would be because of this petition, because only 5 people have signed it. And 100 supporters minimum, because that's enough to get de Blasio's attention. If hundreds of Asians protesting around City Hall can't, I doubt this petition will at all. Anyways, you signing this petition will help 1.1 million students in getting education they deserved. To be fair, you're helping only about 700,000 students while severely harming 340,000 students, but okay. So moving away from Isaiah here, we have this lovely article by Alvin Chang. This website is Vox, and with ads like these, you know it's going to be good. Scrolling down, we see this chart here. What? What even is this? So we have some Minecraft people right here. And oh my god. So we have, I believe, The greenish Minecraft people here are white, and the darker colored ones are blacks and Latinos, and there are no Asians. So, damn, you've accurately represented New York City. One strike for you, bud. Okay, so looking at this chart, we can see some obvious problems. It shows one school with a bunch of students with high test scores, so I'm pretty sure that students have some especially bright students, since so many of them got accepted. The next school, we have 2 bright students who got accepted, but hey, you don't know that. Well, what if the students at school A had prep, or student B and C didn't take the test? That doesn't mean they're not bright. So first off, if school A had students that took prep, then okay, that'll lead into my solution to this problem. So hold off on that thought. Okay, next, if students from B and C are smart, and they didn't take the test, even though if they were smart, acing the test would be easy. So why would they not take the test? And since Bill de Blasio thinks that specialized schools are so good, he's taking action, why the hell would they choose not to take the test? Or maybe you're lying and they aren't smart. That's just a theory. Just a theory. After seeing the second chart, I've found a loophole to the system immediately. I'll give you 5 seconds to spot it. So what if person 1 here moves and goes to school C? Now if he's smart enough to pass the SHSAT, which no one in school C could, then he'll obviously be the best at school C. You see the problem now? If smart students choose to go to worse schools, this makes the problem even worse. Oh, but who are you to judge Bill de Blasio? It's not like you have a Bachelor of Arts or majored in Metropolitan Studies. I guess not, but still, I know how politics works. And what Bill de Blasio did was really smart for a politician's standpoint. So de Blasio won the election with around 73% of the votes. So the 73% is what de Blasio got for him to win, but he only needs 51% to win, just a bit more than the next guy. Now, around 53% of NYC is either Hispanic or Black, and being the Democratic candidate, and that many Hispanics and Blacks are below the poverty line, they gave their votes to him. By that logic, there are 53% of people with Black or Hispanic descent who will give their votes to him, which will make him very popular indeed. After all, he's just looking after their special child who deserves a chance, right? So, what is my solution to this divisive SHSAT test? Look at this website here. At high schools, double the students were under the poverty line. They receive only 15% more funding than low-need schools. The problem is not the test itself, it's the students taking the test. And that problem lies within the schools who are supposed to be teaching these students. There is nothing that says that Asians are smarter than Blacks or Hispanics, so naturally, there should be no reason for a dismal amount of Black and Latino students admitted to specialized high schools. Bill de Blasio, stop with this nonsense to force Black and Hispanics into specialized high schools. It isn't working. You saw by this year's results. Maybe you could divert some of those resources to actual schools instead. It's not hard to prepare for the SHSAT anyways. All you need is around $50 a month, a cheap $100 laptop, and go on to Khan Academy or YouTube and learn something. So Bill de Blasio's main goal, is to overcome the one test, the single test that will make or break a student's high school choice. As I said before, basing on GPA is a terrible way, probably even the worst way to accept a student. Just imagine that because there are no Black people in, say, the Ivy League, Congress passes a bill removing the SAT and ACT, And now all colleges have to accept students based on GPAs. And not only that, while they're looking at GPAs, the school that the students come from don't matter. It's just GPA. The genius in Stuyvesant taking college courses and maintaining a 97 average will lose to a smart person in underfunded high school taking on-level courses and maintaining a 105 average. In this scenario, elite high schools would not exist. Students will try their best to go to the easiest high schools, have the highest averages to get into the Ivy League. This in turn compromises the intended purpose of schools, which is to actually learn. Report cards should never be used to determine how smart a student is. That's because report cards come from different schools. All report cards do is measure a student's progress, and that's all they should be used for. You still disagree with me? Fine, just think to yourself. Should schools be allowed to write their own SATs because there aren't enough blacks in the Ivy League? Should China be allowed to write the US immigration forms because not enough people are emigrating? And should you determine the minimum amount of people of each race should be in a movie? Oh, if this jury doesn't have 0.02% of people from Bahrain, then I'm not being accurately represented. Ow. On to the Hall of Shame, your favorite place to find hypocritical, ignorant statements made by people who think they know what the heck they're talking about. If you don't like me attacking people on the internet, I suggest you leave right now. I just don't buy into a narrative that any one ethnic group owns admission to these schools. Well, neither do any of us. We didn't tell the others to do poorly on the SHSAT. That was them. This one's long. As a man of color, Carranza shot back, I'm going to call on your language. The coded language that we use, where we're diluting these schools because we're giving more opportunity to a wider array of students, is highly offensive. Aw, I feel so sorry for you. I can't believe it. You have to use your race to defend yourself. And if you guys didn't know, this was a comment in response to a parent saying, would due to the reputations of these schools once the quality of the student body is changed somehow. Well, if you're going to lower the standard to get in, I can definitely see that. And next time, how about you don't base your actions on mundane reasoning in order to diversify schools? He was more on point when he recently said to a large Asian audience, the notion that you can only receive a quality education at a specialized high school is false. The audience wasn't pleased, but Carranza was right. Okay, I'll do you one better. The notion that you shouldn't drop out of high school to be successful is false. The audience wasn't pleased, but he was right. And even better, the notion that dying is bad for you is false. The audience wasn't pleased, but he was right. Am I the only one that sees it's weird that he's saying this to an Asian audience? Okay, this next one. The schools which admit students based on a single test look starkly different from the school system overall. While Black and Hispanic students represent nearly 70% of public schools, they make up just 10% of students at the specialized high schools, a vast underrepresentation that has long been since considered an injustice and a symbol of the city's extreme school segregation. Extreme school segregation. How? In my example, not all juries have 0.02% of people from Bahrain, but I wouldn't go so far to call it extreme jury segregation. Mayor Bill de Blasio offered a two-pronged plan on Saturday to address this, first by setting aside 20% of the seats at each of the specialized high schools for students from high-poverty schools, which tend to have a high share of Black and Hispanics, who scored just below the cutoff point. This quote is basically meaningless, as I've proved that blacks are more underrepresented in household in poverty than Asians. For the Hispanics, I can see that being a problem. Do you still disagree with me? Then read this. For one thing, his plan seems purposely oblivious to his administration's utter failure to prepare students across the city for the admissions test. And for a school as challenging as Stuyvesant, in nearly 1/4 of the city's public middle schools, 0 7th graders scored at the advanced level on the annual New York State mathematics exams in 2017. Mr. de Blasio would send the top 7% of students at each middle school to the specialized high schools, but at 80 middle schools, or 1 out of every 6, not even 7% of 7th graders passed the state math exam. Now do you see? No matter what Carranza and de Blasio say, basing on class rank and GPA will most certainly degrade the quality of the students. You're extending the selection of students from those who do well on a somewhat hard test to accepting those who can't pass the 7th grade state test, which is so easy it has been dumbed down so that even an elementary schooler could do well on that test. 1 out of 6 schools had over 93% of students who could not pass that test. Mr. Carranza, is this not a pressing issue, like at all? But instead, it's a better move to attack the SHSAT in a futile attempt to diversify high schools. Yeah, it makes sense. Now, let me go over this again. In 1/4 of NYC public middle schools, 0 7th graders placed into advanced math. That's 25% of schools. In 17% of middle schools, 93% of students do not pass the state math test. And instead of providing those students who need that support and actually help them, Carranza want to stick them into specialized high schools to win over their parents while at the same time kicking out Asians. Mr. Carranza. Bruh. If you are a social justice warrior on the internet, then you might have perceived this video as an attack on black people, especially after the comment where I said it was a problem Hispanics were in poverty, but it wasn't really a problem that many blacks were in poverty. I meant it as poverty was not the issue for the lack of diversity in specialized high schools. Bill de Blasio said that many races are poor, such as blacks and Latinos, which is why they can't afford private prep to prepare for the SHSAT. The fact that I singled out black people on this is to just show that Bill de Blasio's reasoning is flawed. Yes, Latinos are generally poor, and they score pretty bad on the SHSAT. The same goes for black people, but then again, Asians are poor. Generally, they're more poor than black people, yet they score well on the SHSAT. It might seem that way because white people have a lower poverty rate, proportionate to their population. And if you disagree with me that Bill de Blasio's and Carranza's new plan to accept the top 7% of students will not degrade the student body, then you are pretty mistaken. Just think, all students in, for example, STY did well on the SHSAT. The SHSAT is harder than the state test. Now, with Bill de Blasio's and Carranza's 7% system, where they just accept the top 7% of students in specialized high schools, some students that the system will accept did not pass. No, not just didn't do well, they didn't even pass the state tests. So I believe that clears up most of the misconceptions. If you want to leave a hate comment, you are free to do so. Just make sure there's not a spelling error and make sure to put any grammar at all. And yeah, see you next time.